If any of you out there are in the process of transitioning to a different career, changing jobs, changing industries, and you're asking yourself, how can I manage this career transition? Then this video is for you. Today in this video, I want to talk about the concept of transformational assets and why these are so important in the 21st century. For a certain time, I seriously doubted my own career path. And the reason was because my career path was not a straight and neat line at all. There were so many transitions. I moved across different countries and also across industries. I started working in project management in banking and then moved to acting, filmmaking, and film producing. And now I'm about to get a postgraduate degree in film and television business. And at first, my own career path looked like a big messy piece of patchwork to me. But now the more I try to look at it from a distance and see the bigger picture, it actually starts making more and more sense to me. I came across this book called The 100-Year Life, where I got a lot of really good insights that allowed me to look at my career through a different lens. And it seemed like this kind of career model, where there are many transitions, job changes, career changes, is exactly the model of the future. So I found relief in knowing that I might be on the right track after all. There are three main types of transformational assets, and I would dare to say that having these transformational assets is what separates successful people from unsuccessful people, however you want to define success. And here's a bit of background information to help understand the world nowadays in terms of work and career. Back then, in our parents' or grandparents' day, most people had the security of being able to work in one or two jobs for their entire life. But nowadays, it's quite different. There are rarely people who stay in the same job for 30 or 40 years. That kind of security, if you will, simply doesn't exist. So instead of hanging on to one job and one career, what most people will do in our generation is that they will experience multiple transitions between jobs and even careers. And this is due to two reasons. The first reason is what we could call an external factor, which is the general economy or the company strategy, which may necessitate them to lay off people. And the second reason is because many people nowadays take ownership of their own career and they voluntarily choose to quit their jobs, leave their old career, and start a new career or transition to a new industry. And some people simply want to take a break from the job that they were working in for the last 10 or 20 years to either upgrade their skill, go back to work, or even start their own business. And oftentimes when people start something new, they will experience this as a kind of crisis. Many people are familiar with what is called the midlife crisis or also the quarter life crisis. But I would say that experiencing a crisis is not attached to a certain age, but rather to a certain phase you are in your life. So each time that you are making a transition where you are leaving something known and familiar behind to move on to something that is unfamiliar and perhaps a bit risky, then you are stuck in an area that's in between, that is a bit risky, that is insecure, that is uncertain, and that is where you experience something like a crisis. And I would urge you here not to see a crisis as something that is negative. On the contrary, a crisis is needed if you want to make progress and move on to something better. Nowadays, a lot of change and transitioning is needed to adapt to whatever is currently going on in the world. But I would say that it is not just an external requirement. It's not just the case that you are forced to change or adapt, although that is also the case in a certain way. Rather, that nowadays you also have a lot of options. You have the options to take ownership of your career and have the option to change your career and to transition in a way and to a place where you want to be instead of just going with the flow and doing what everyone else does. And transitioning, the ability to affect change, whether it's wanted or unwanted, is a skill nowadays. And I would say it's almost a meta skill. And in the book 100 Life, Linda Gratton and Andrew Scott say that transformational skills are so important that they deserve their own asset class. So they are called transformational assets. You're surely aware that we have physical assets, we have tangible assets like money, property, our car, and so on. But not so many people are aware that we also have intangible assets, which we also need to maintain and grow, because otherwise these can also depreciate. If you have any plans to change your career in near time, or you are aware of the fact that in this lifetime at some point you will need to make some changes to your career, then the ability to transition is crucial. The first transformational asset or idea is self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is needed in order to craft your identity. And here you might be asking me, crafting my identity? Isn't my identity kind of fixed? Isn't my identity my gender, my nationality, my ethnicity, and so on? While some parts of your identity are fixed, when it comes to career, then it's not fixed at all. Rather, your identity in terms of career, your career identity, if you will, is something that you yourself can and have to craft. In the past, people would derive their sense of identity from the role or status that they had in society. So they would be, for example, the school principal in a certain town, or the head pharmacist in this town, and so on. But nowadays, people tend to take on more roles and can be defined by multiple things. For example, Sanjay Gupta is a neurosurgeon, but he's also a newscaster on CNN. My father, for example, is a researcher. He's a university lecturer, a book author, and a podcaster in the making. And I myself am a YouTuber, an actor and filmmaker in the making, and also a career enthusiast and some other things. And I bet that you can also explain who you are, what your career identity is in many multiple ways, and it's likely to be a combination of different things. Perhaps you are an accountant and blogger and social media influencer, or perhaps you are a project manager and a dog trainer, or maybe you're a cameraman who also makes his own documentaries on social issues and also does a ton of volunteer work. But some of you are perhaps, just perhaps, still a bit confused about your career identity. But in order to craft this identity, you need a huge amount of self-knowledge. You need the ability to understand yourself very well. Also to reflect where you are right now, why you are here, and where you want to go. And also the ability to morph. And when it comes to transformation, it's not simply a matter of adding skills or adding knowledge. If you look at a library, it's not about adding more and more books to the library, but it's about changing the structure and the setup of the library itself, how you arrange things, how you arrange knowledge blocks, and how you make sense of the experiences that you had so far. It's about changing your mindset about the way you see things. Just imagine for a second that you are sitting in a large box, and all that you understand about this box is that it has 4 walls around you and a floor, and you're thinking about how to get up. And the truth is that you will never be able to get out of the box unless you are willing to look up and discover that there is actually no lid on the box, that there is no lid that prevents you from jumping out or climbing out of the box. It's a bit like Michael Scofield from Prison Break, who managed to escape the prison by seeing things that other people didn't see. Anyone watch Prison Break here? So if you want to change anything in your life, or you want to get out of a rut in case you're in one, you have to have the ability to understand your past at least a bit, your present, and your future. So you need to know where you want to go. But not only that, you have to be able to imagine possible future versions of you or future selves. And that is based on the belief that you can change, that right now, this is the way you are, these are the skills that you have, the knowledge that that you have, but it's only a temporary situation. Although you do not have those photography skills yet that you would like to have, but you want to become a famous and successful photographer, it doesn't mean that you will never get there. You are just not there yet. But in order to get there, you have to start at least by having the capability to imagine that, to imagine the possibility that one day you can be that successful photographer. So if right now you feel lost or stuck in your career, or perhaps you even lost your job because of this situation, it's time to move on. Think seriously about where you want to go and what it takes to get there, especially in terms of mindset. What is the mindset that is holding you back, and how do you need to change that mindset so that you can move forward? And also, how do you need to change the way that you see yourself? Let's say that right now you are a pharmacist and you want to become a photographer. And perhaps right now as pharmacists, you are very well respected and highly regarded for your high education and your knowledge and so on. And you tend to see yourself just as a pharmacist, and it is really difficult for you to change your mindset and imagine that sometime in the future you could be a successful photographer. And that makes it really, really difficult to change, because if you want to change, you have to at least have that vision in your head. You have to have that image in your head, seeing yourself as a successful photographer. And this is where the concept of self-image and changing your self-image comes into place. And as this is another huge topic, I will save this for another time. So let's move on. The second idea of transformational assets is diverse networks. I never loved the idea of networking. When I think of networking, what comes to mind is a formal event, people wearing fancy clothes, blazers and suits, and holding a drink and making small talk to strangers. And for an introvert, in case you are one, you know what I mean, this is a horror scenario. But now I'm starting to see networking a bit differently, and at least I try, because I know how important it is. And to be honest, my career has benefited from the fact that I do have some really good networks. One of the networks that you already have is your current network, the people that you know from work or from university or your friends, and these are usually the first degree connections that you have on LinkedIn. And these networks are all very important, but when it comes to career, especially career prospects, even more important are the networks outside of these networks, which is the second layer of networks. Diverse networks are those kind of networks that you grow when you get involved in new kinds of activities and get to know new people, and also when a friend introduces you to their acquaintance, and these become your second and third degree connections. As we know, it's often the case that people get jobs through their connections, but more often than not, they get these jobs not from their first degree connections, but from their second, third, or sometimes even fourth degree connections. So why is this the case? The reason is because your first degree connections usually have the same kind of information as you. Within this first layer of networks, there is a kind of redundancy of information. And once you step outside and get connected to this second layer of connections, that is when you get access to new information about the job market and opportunities. So growing the second or even third or fourth layer of connections is what is crucial if you want to increase your career prospects. There's another good reason why you should expand your current network in a rather targeted way, of course. New networks are transformational. These new connections that you make are ideally people who are already doing what you want to do, who are already working in the field where you want to move to. It gives you access to a ton of informal information, and more often than not, this informal kind of information is what is most valuable. For example, if you want to become a dog trainer, it is a good idea to expand your network and get connected to many people who are already in that field, who are already training dogs, because by doing that, it will be much easier for you to follow in their footsteps and learn from their experiences. Do you know those kind of people who seem to be super agile? They change jobs and they get a lot of promotions and they make a lot of progress in seemingly short time. But on the other hand, they don't always seem to be the most intelligent people. If you take a closer look, what these kind of people have that others don't is a wide and strong network and access to a lot of opportunities. And for those of us who are perhaps on the slower side and less flexible, we wonder how in the world are they capable of doing it. It's only in these recent years that I began to appreciate that the skill of building networks is a really valuable skill that cannot be underestimated. I would even say that the skill to build and grow networks and the ability to access and really make use of the opportunities within that network is a skill that is almost as valuable, if not more valuable, than the core skill itself. And this is also the reason why I think that oftentimes, or even most of the times, it's not the smartest people who are most successful. Transformational asset number 3 is openness to experience. Openness to experience is a very abstract asset, I would say. But on the other hand, in psychology, it is actually measurable, as it is one of the big 5 personality traits. When we've been doing the same things or the same job for years or even a decade, then we tend to fall into certain work routines and habits. But if we want to make a change and transition to a different career, then it's necessary that we leave behind some of those old routines and habits. And this can result in a lot of anxiety for many people. You might know the feeling, how it is after you graduated and you started your first job. So you needed to adjust to a lot of things, the way people work, how it's done in the corporate world, and so on. And even if you've already been in your second and third job and you're moving on to your fourth job, there is a bit of anxiety around that because you will need to leave behind your old ways of doing things, because it is likely that in the new company things are done totally differently. This is even more the case if you leave your job to start a new business. If you've been working in a corporation, let's say for 10 years, you've been used to a level of organization. There is a department for every little thing, and there is a process in place, and there are rules. But once you leave your job and you start your own company, your own business, then you realize that there are so many small things that you need to think about legal aspects, about finance, about budgeting, and so on. So there's a lot of new things to learn and a lot of old things to leave behind. But that is the only way that you can change. It might feel risky, but the only way is to just walk over that bridge if you want to get to your destination. Another example is if previously you've been working in a full-time job and you received a fixed salary every month, and now you are considering going into freelancing. That will be a dramatically different experience because the income will not be stable. You'll not always know when you'll get the next paycheck. And in the beginning, at least, in order to make ends meet, you might need to trim your budget a bit and downsize your standard of living a bit until you get to a steady income. For people who are rather rigid and inflexible, this might sound impossible to them. How can I not eat out every day or not go shopping every week? How can I possibly upload a YouTube video without planning it out in the finest detail for 3 weeks, making sure every little thing is right before I record it and upload it? How can I possibly change careers after I invested 15 years in working as a doctor? No one has to change. No one forces you to change. You can just stay where you are if you feel that that is nice and comfortable. But staying put and not changing also carries a risk. Nowadays, with so many rapid changes happening in the economy, in technology, like in AI and automation, we can no longer just feel safe with the skill set and knowledge that we have, that we acquired from university 5 or 10 years ago. In case you know Gary Vee, he often talks about the way that he built his business. The fact that his family owned a business, a liquor store, helped him in part to build that business in the first place, but it was mostly due to his own hard work. But he said something very interesting, and this is something along the lines of that if his business right now would ever be destroyed for some reason or failed, and he would need to build it from scratch again, he would actually be excited about that prospect because he loves the process of building things and the process of change and improving. And this is what I think is so crucial nowadays, the ability and the willingness willingness to take risk and to try things out and be willing to fail but quickly get up on your feet again. But to do that, openness to experience is needed to be able to see things and experiences from a different angle and not be stuck in your old mindsets and old habits. Let me know in the comments if this video has changed your perspective about what actually matters. And if this video was useful to you, don't forget to like the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.